the earliest they found so far, but a great deal of Göbekli Tepe is still underground.
Right, so at least what we know is someone built some pretty impressive structures 11,600 years ago.
7,000 years before Stonehenge.
So
What if everything we know about civilization is wrong? In 2014, Klaus Schmidt, the man who uncovered Göbekli Tepe, died suddenly, just weeks after discovering a hidden chamber beneath the site. Walls smooth as glass, a structure he could not explain, something he said was still active. His notes and photos were confiscated, the chamber sealed, and the truth buried. Göbekli Tepe wasn't the beginning of civilization, Schmidt hinted. It was the end. A warning from a forgotten catastrophe, preserved for us. What secrets are still hidden beneath those ancient stones? And why has the world been kept in the dark?
11,500 years ago by hunter-gatherers. That's 6,000 years earlier than Stonehenge. And yet somehow our ancestors were capable of making this.
The temple that shouldn't exist. Klaus Schmidt was not looking for lost civilizations. He was not a fringe theorist or an ancient mysteries enthusiast. He was a conventional German archaeologist, trained at the universities of Heidelberg and Erlangen, specializing in the Neolithic period. The transition from hunting and gathering to farming and settled life. He spent years working on excavations across the Middle East, documenting the slow, gradual process by which humans developed agriculture and built the first villages. He was meticulous, conservative, careful in his interpretations, the kind of scientist who follows evidence wherever it leads but never speculates beyond what the data supports. In 1994, Schmidt was shown survey data from a site in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, which translates to Potbelly Hill. Previous archaeologists had examined it in the 1960s and dismissed it as a medieval cemetery. Nothing interesting. But Schmidt noticed something others had missed. The hill itself was artificial, man-made, and very, very old. He began excavations in 1995, expecting to find perhaps a Neolithic village, some stone foundations, pottery fragments, the usual markers of early agricultural communities. What he found instead should not exist. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, each weighing between 10 and 20 tons, stood arranged in circular enclosures.
one of the largest T-shaped pillars, which would have stood up between 22 and 24 feet tall. And so this is something I tried to find last year, failed miserably. So we managed to get a guard to come and show us while it's not very busy here at Göbekli Tepe.
The pillars were carved with intricate reliefs showing lions, foxes, scorpions, vultures, snakes, and other animals rendered with extraordinary skill. The craftsmanship was not primitive. It was sophisticated, three-dimensional, anatomically accurate. The organization of the site was complex, requiring coordinated labor on a massive scale, and the dating was impossible. Using multiple methods, Schmidt established that Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BCE, over 11,000 years ago. To understand why this is impossible, you need to understand what archaeologists believed humans were capable of at that time. In 9600 BCE, according to every established model, humans lived as small bands of hunter-gatherers in temporary camps. They had no agriculture, no domesticated animals, no pottery, no metal tools, no writing, no permanent settlements. They spent their days foraging for food and their nights huddled around fires trying not to die. They were not carving 20-ton stone pillars with geometric precision. They were not organizing hundreds of workers into coordinated labor forces. They were not creating complex symbolic art that required generations of artistic development. But Göbekli Tepe was there. The stones were real. The carvings were real. The impossible date was confirmed again and again by every testing method available. Schmidt published his findings and became famous overnight. National Geographic featured the site. Documentaries were made. Textbooks were rewritten. Göbekli Tepe was declared the world's first temple, proof that religion came before civilization, that the desire to build sacred spaces drove humans to develop agriculture rather than the other way around. It was a revolutionary discovery, but still a comfortable one. It expanded our timeline without overturning it completely. Humans were more capable than we thought. Earlier than we thought, but still recognizably human. Still following a path of gradual development that we could understand. Schmidt gave hundreds of interviews repeating this narrative. He wrote papers. He became the public face of Göbekli Tepe. But privately, something was bothering him. Something about the site that didn't fit the story he was telling. Something that got worse the deeper he dug. Göbekli Tepe, civilization's final warning. The first problem was the stones themselves. The pillars at Göbekli Tepe weren't rough monuments carved by people learning as they went. They were precisely shaped, perfectly balanced, and geometrically exact. The T-shape was consistent across dozens of pillars spanning multiple enclosures. The carvings showed sophisticated technique, not the scratchy attempts of beginners, but confident, skilled work that should have taken generations to develop. You would expect to find evidence of that development. Earlier attempts, practice pieces, crude prototypes that gradually improved over time. That's how technology works. That's how craftsmanship develops. But there was nothing. Göbekli Tepe appeared fully formed. No predecessors, no learning curve, no developmental sequence anywhere in the archaeological record. The builders arrived knowing exactly what they were doing, as if they had built temples like this before, even though no earlier structures existed anywhere in the world. In 2009, Schmidt admitted publicly that the site appeared without antecedents. He said this violated everything we understand about technological development. Then there was the question of logistics. Each pillar weighed 10 to 20 tons. They were quarried from bedrock a quarter-mile away, carved with stone tools because metal didn't exist yet, transported uphill, and erected with perfect precision, without wheels, without cranes, without pulleys, without any of the mechanical advantages that later civilizations used for similar projects. The archaeological establishment explained this as massive organized labor, hundreds of people pulling with ropes, using logs as rollers, applying sheer determination. But Schmidt did the calculations. He estimated the population density of the region at that time based on carrying capacity for hunter-gatherers. He calculated the calories required for the labor of quarrying, carving, transporting, and erecting these stones. He factored in the reality that hunter-gatherers spend most of their waking hours finding food. Every able-bodied person in a foraging society is needed for survival. There is no surplus labor to redirect toward construction projects. The numbers didn't work. There weren't enough people in the region to build Göbekli Tepe while simultaneously hunting and gathering enough food to survive. Not with the technology available, not without agriculture to support a large settled population. In a 2011 lecture, Schmidt admitted that they could not adequately explain the logistics of Göbekli Tepe's construction within current understanding of Neolithic capabilities. The labor requirements exceeded what the population could have provided, but the strangest discovery was yet to come. As excavations continued, Schmidt's team uncovered more enclosures. Each one was deeper in the earth than the last. Each one was older, and each one was more sophisticated. This was backwards. In every normal archaeological site, you find crude early attempts at the bottom, overlaid by progressively refined later work as techniques improve over time. At Göbekli Tepe, it was reversed. The oldest enclosures, buried deepest, showed the most advanced construction, the most precise carving, the most complex organization. The newer layers showed decline. Smaller stones, less precise arrangement, cruder carvings. Göbekli Tepe wasn't developing. It was degrading. Schmidt struggled to explain this in his published papers. He suggested maybe the site's importance declined over time. But privately, he knew this made no sense. Why would a site important enough to build become less important? Why would the builder's skills decline rather than improve? In a 2012 interview with a German archaeology magazine, Schmidt finally said what he had been thinking. He said he had begun to believe they were not looking at the beginning of something, but at the end. He thought Göbekli Tepe represented the final achievement of a culture already in decline. The people who built this had knowledge and capabilities that were being lost. They built Göbekli Tepe as a memorial, a warning, an attempt to preserve something that was disappearing. This comment went unnoticed outside specialist circles, but it represented a fundamental shift in how Schmidt understood the site. He was no longer describing humanity's first temple. He was describing humanity's last attempt to remember something. The Forbidden Chamber. In 2013, during excavations in one of the deeper enclosures, Schmidt's team discovered something that should not exist. A small chamber beneath the main floor, carefully sealed with fitted stones. When they opened it, they found a collection of objects that appeared to be tools, but unlike any tools from any period Schmidt had ever seen. He described them in his personal notes as smooth and geometrically precise. Some were stone, others were made of a material he couldn't identify. They weren't functional in any obvious way. They didn't cut, grind, pound, or scrape. They were simply perfect forms. Too perfect. He wrote that they had no category for them. Schmidt showed the objects to colleagues. The response was immediate dismissal. They must be later intrusions, misidentified natural formations, hoaxes planted by workers. But Schmidt's excavation methods were meticulous. The chamber had been sealed since the structure was built over 11,000 years ago. There was no possibility of later intrusion. The objects were clearly human-made, showing deliberate shaping and tool marks. They simply should not exist in 9,600 BCE. Schmidt sent samples for analysis. The results confused everyone. Some objects contained trace elements that didn't match local geology. One piece appeared to be a copper alloy, but copper metallurgy wasn't developed in that region until 4,000 years later. The testing laboratory suggested contamination. Schmidt ran additional tests. Same results. He tried to publish these findings. The papers were rejected. Reviewers said the claims were extraordinary and required extraordinary evidence. They suggested his laboratory methods were flawed. They recommended he focus on the more conventional aspects of the site. Schmidt stopped trying to publish, but he didn't stop investigating. The breakthrough came in 2014. His team was working in the lowest level of the site, in enclosures that radiocarbon dating suggested might be 12,000 years old or more. They were excavating around one of the massive T-shaped pillars when they noticed something strange about the bedrock beneath it. It wasn't solid. Using ground-penetrating radar, they discovered a cavity system extending deep into the bedrock, not natural caves. Carved chambers, regular, geometric, clearly artificial. Schmidt made the decision to excavate. It required enormous effort. They had to partially disassemble the enclosure above, shore up the pillars, and carefully dig down into the cavity. What they found changed everything Schmidt thought he knew. In a letter to a colleague written days after the discovery, Schmidt described a chamber with walls smooth as glass, dimensions precise to the millimeter. In the center stood a structure he couldn't classify. He called it something between a machine and an altar. It was made of stone, but stone that had been transformed somehow. It contained symbols that weren't a written language and diagrams that didn't depict anything recognizable. And it was, according to Schmidt, still active. What did that mean? According to team members who spoke anonymously after Schmidt's death, the structure in the chamber emitted a low hum that could be felt more than heard. Electromagnetic field detectors showed unusual readings. Compasses behaved erratically near it. Several team members reported headaches, disorientation, and strange dreams after spending time in the chamber. Schmidt documented everything meticulously. He took hundreds of photographs. He made detailed sketches. He brought in geologists, engineers, physicists, anyone who might help explain what they had found. Nobody could. The chamber's construction was inexplicable. The walls showed no tool marks, as if the stone had been melted or molded rather than carved. The structure in the center appeared to be shaped from the bedrock itself, which should be impossible. You cannot shape bedrock in place without removing it first. And then there were the symbols covering the walls in precise rows. They weren't pictographic. They weren't representations of animals or objects. They were abstract, geometric, mathematical. They reminded Schmidt of circuit diagrams or star charts, but far more complex. Some symbols repeated with variations, suggesting a language or code. Schmidt brought in linguists, mathematicians, computer scientists. They found regularities suggesting intentional meaning, but couldn't decipher what that meaning was. The symbols didn't match any known writing system. They predated writing itself by 6,000 years. But they were clearly communicating. Someone was trying to convey information, and that someone possessed a level of abstract thinking that supposedly didn't exist in 10,000 BCE. Secrets buried in stone. In his final interviews, conducted just weeks before his death, Schmidt was asked directly what he now believed Göbekli Tepe actually was. For 20 years, he had given the same careful answer: the world's first temple, a revolutionary discovery that expanded our understanding of Neolithic capabilities, a site of religious significance built by sophisticated hunter-gatherers. But in those final weeks, Schmidt abandoned every academic caution he had maintained throughout his career. His answer shocked the interviewers. He said he no longer believed Göbekli Tepe was a temple in any religious sense we would recognize. He believed it was a facility, an installation, part of a network of sites scattered across the region that we are only beginning to discover. And he believed it was built by people who possessed knowledge far beyond anything we attribute to that period of human history. The interviewer pressed him on that word. People. Was Schmidt suggesting something other than human? Aliens? Ancient gods? The kind of claims that would destroy any scientist's credibility overnight? Schmidt was careful but firm in his response. He said he was not claiming extraterrestrial intervention or supernatural beings. What he was claiming was far more unsettling to the archaeological establishment. He said we have absolutely no idea what humans were truly capable of 12,000 years ago. We have no written records from that time because writing didn't exist yet, or so we assume. We have no detailed artifacts because we haven't found them yet, or because they were destroyed, or because we don't recognize them for what they are. All we have are stone tools and bones. We have assumed our ancestors were primitive because that assumption fits our comfortable narrative of steady progress, from caves to cities, from grunting savages to sophisticated moderns. But Göbekli Tepe proves that assumption is catastrophically wrong. Whoever built this site possessed advanced knowledge of geometry that rivals modern engineering. They understood astronomy well enough to encode precise stellar configurations in stone. They had mastered construction techniques that we still cannot fully explain. They may have understood sciences we haven't even identified yet, knowledge encoded in those strange symbols that no linguist can decipher. They were not primitive. They were not fumbling their way toward civilization. They were as sophisticated as we are, possibly more so in certain areas. And then something happened. Something terrible. Their knowledge was lost. Their civilization collapsed. Not for the first time in Earth's history, Schmidt added quietly, for the most recent time. The interviewer asked what happened to them. What could destroy a civilization advanced enough to build Göbekli Tepe? Schmidt said he didn't know for certain, but he believed the site itself was designed to tell us. The carvings covering those massive pillars weren't decorative. They were informational, data encoded in stone. The pillars themselves weren't monuments built for worship or ceremony. They were markers, signposts, warnings, The entire complex, all of it, every enclosure and every carved image was a message sent across time from people who knew they were dying to people who hadn't been born yet. And we have been so focused on Göbekli Tepe's archaeological value, so busy cataloging and measuring and debating construction techniques, that we haven't stopped to ask the most important question: what is the site actually trying to tell us? The interviewer asked what the message was. Schmidt paused for a very long time before answering. When he spoke again, his voice was different, heavier. He said the carvings at Göbekli Tepe depict cosmic catastrophe, not mythology, not religious symbolism, actual events, comet impacts streaking across the sky, catastrophic floods consuming everything, mass extinction of animals and humans alike, and most remarkably, they show astronomical configurations, positions of stars and constellations that scientists have confirmed correspond precisely to the sky around 10,800 BCE. That date is not random. It matches exactly when ice core data shows a massive climate disruption called the Younger Dryas impact event. Something struck the Earth around that time. Temperatures plummeted. Ecosystems collapsed. Megafauna went extinct. And according to Schmidt, a human civilization we have completely forgotten was wiped from existence. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe weren't mythology created by primitive minds trying to explain natural phenomena.
The site of Göbekli Tepe is a series of circular enclosures.
They were history, an eyewitness record of something that actually happened, carved by people who survived it and wanted to make sure the next civilization would know. Schmidt believed Göbekli Tepe was not built before civilization as we've been taught. It was built by a civilization that was in the process of being destroyed. The people who carved those pillars were survivors, refugees from a global catastrophe that erased almost everything their culture had built. They were trying to rebuild, trying to preserve what knowledge they could before it was completely lost. They buried the site deliberately, layer by layer, enclosure by enclosure, as if protecting it for a future they knew they would never see. They encoded their warnings in stone because stone would survive when everything else burned or flooded or crumbled to dust. And they hoped, with whatever faith they had left, that whoever came after them, whoever rebuilt civilization from the rubble of theirs, would eventually find Göbekli Tepe and understand what it meant. His final recorded statement, made exactly 3 weeks before his sudden death, abandoned all academic hedging. Schmidt said, "We have been here before. Human civilization has risen and fallen before recorded history. What we believe is the first civilization, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, is actually a rebuilding, a recovery, a second attempt after complete collapse. And whatever caused that collapse, whatever burned the first version of human achievement to the ground, is still out there, still capable of happening again." Göbekli Tepe was built by survivors who wanted to warn us,
The monument was built much earlier than the available evidence seemed to suggest.
who spent generations carving that warning into stone and burying it where it would be, safe. And 12,000 years later, we found their message. We excavated their warning. And we are not listening. The burial. On July 20th, 2014, Klaus Schmidt died suddenly while swimming near the excavation site. He was 61 years old with no history of heart problems. His death was ruled natural. Heat, stress, overwork, nothing suspicious according to official reports. But what happened after his death raises serious questions. The underground chamber was immediately sealed by Turkish authorities. It was declared structurally unstable and too dangerous for further excavation. The entrance was filled with concrete. Ground-penetrating radar studies of the area were prohibited. Schmidt's final photographs and notes were confiscated. His family was told they were now state property of the Turkish government. Requests to access them have been consistently denied. The objects found in the sealed chamber in 2013 were sent to a facility in Ankara for analysis. They have never been publicly displayed or described in detail. Official reports say they were of limited archaeological significance. The team members who worked with Schmidt on the chamber excavation have remained remarkably quiet. Most refuse to discuss it at all. Those who have spoken do so anonymously, mentioning only unusual findings and things they couldn't explain before changing the subject. The German documentary team that conducted Schmidt's final interviews had their footage confiscated at the Turkish border. They were told it violated antiquities laws. Only audio transcripts survived, preserved by the interviewer who had made backup copies. Göbekli Tepe remains open for excavation, but under much stricter government oversight. No foreign teams have been allowed to dig in the deeper levels where Schmidt made his final discoveries. The site has become a tourist attraction with walkways and interpretive signs explaining the world's first temple. The same comfortable narrative that Schmidt had completely rejected by the end of his life. In the archaeological community, Schmidt is remembered as the brilliant scientist who discovered Göbekli Tepe. His later claims about advanced ancient knowledge, lost civilizations, and cosmic warnings are quietly ignored or attributed to the tragic decline of a once rigorous mind that became obsessed with his own discovery. But a small group of researchers has continued pursuing Schmidt's final theories. They point to ground-penetrating radar studies conducted before those studies were prohibited, showing massive structures still buried beneath the site. Estimates suggest only 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. The rest remains underground, sealed and forbidden. They note that similar sites have been discovered across the region. Karahan Tepe, Harbetsuvan Tepesi, Sefer Tepe, all showing the same impossibly sophisticated construction, all from the same period, all inexplicably advanced for their supposed time. They argue Schmidt was right. These aren't temples. They're nodes in a network, a system of sites built for a purpose we don't yet understand. And they point to one final piece of evidence that keeps Schmidt's warning alive. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe depict astronomical configurations that scientists have confirmed correspond to the sky around 10,800 BCE. They show what appears to be a comet strike. They show flooding and death. They show the positions of stars and constellations with accuracy that shouldn't be possible for people without telescopes or written astronomical records. Either our ancestors were far more scientifically advanced than we believe, or someone else taught them. Either way, the carvings are not random decorations. They are data. They are a record. They are a warning carved in stone and buried in earth and sealed with concrete and ignored by everyone with the power to investigate further. The stones of Göbekli Tepe still stand. The carvings still speak. The chambers, Schmidt discovered, remain sealed beneath layers of concrete, holding secrets that could rewrite everything we think we know about humanity's past. We have barely scratched the surface, and yet the warning encoded in those stones may be more urgent now than ever. What if the collapse Schmidt believed destroyed the first advanced civilization isn't just a story of the past, but a threat that could echo into our future? How much longer can we ignore the messages buried in plain sight? And at what cost? The story of Göbekli Tepe is far from finished. The stones are waiting, the questions remain, and the truth may still be watching us back.